everybody, Jewel back with another super cool astrology video, and I wanted to talk about the conjunction between Mars and the Moon in Synastry today. So the Moon is our ability to feel secure, what we do when we want to feel secure, what we want to do when we want to feel comfortable and taken care of, and even ourselves out on the storms of life, and what our needs are, our need to feel safe and secure and taken care of and fed. And Mars is very different because Mars is the action-oriented part of the ego. It's the part of the ego that wants to be appreciated for what it goes out and gets, what it does, the actions that we take. And it is very much an individual part of ourself, and something that doesn't want to take orders because it is that original energy of Aries, which is, independence and the self. And so when we have these two, and also Mars is anger, aggression, male sexuality. So when we have these two in conjunction, we are seeing a blending of those two energies. And if this is an out of sign conjunction, it's even more difficult, this particular combination. So when these two meet up in a conjunction, any aspect that we have between Mars and the Moon in any way is going to cause a certain amount of emotionality or emotional volatility between two people because of the nature of what these two planets are. So when we have the Moon, which is, staying home and security and just wanting to feel comfort, and Mars, which is wanting to go to war and is our aggression and all things that are just about me, these two can have a hard time blending. On the one hand, they're very attracted to each other because there is a strong understanding that we just may find what we need in each other. So the Mars person sees that their desires may be fulfilled by this Moon person, and the Moon person feels like their needs may be fulfilled. And so they strongly bond with this particular conjunction. There's a lot of passion here. And there's a lot of promise with this particular conjunction as well. Now, anytime we have the Mars and the Moon in hard aspect to each other in synastry, and the conjunction is a hard aspect, we're going to have a certain amount of difficulty for the Moon person. And you have to consider what sign and strength is the Mars person. But in any combination, generally, we are going to see the Moon person being hurt or wounded or irritated to some degree by the actions and the energy of the Mars person. So when we have this going on, the Moon person can often feel hurt by the Mars person. They can feel bullied. They can feel pushed around. They can even sometimes be intimidated by the Mars person because of what Mars is. You've got somebody's volatility sitting right next to your feelings and in the most sensitive part of yourself. Sensitive part of yourself. So a lot of times the Moon person reacts very strongly, emotionally, to the Mars person. And the Mars person, because this is a very reactive part of us, reacts to the Moon person. So when we see Moon-Mars hard aspects in synastry, we see, something like this. But you did this to me, says the Moon, but I meant this, but I felt like this, but I meant this, and how can you be acting like this? You're just acting crazy, but it's because I'm hurt, and you're just being insane. You're too sensitive. You're too sensitive. I don't understand why you have to act this way when I act like this, but I don't understand why you have to act this way when I act like this. So it goes up, 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 up. there's no objectivity when we have Moon-Mars aspects, because these two planets don't know when to turn off the faucet. They don't know when to turn off the passion. Mars doesn't just shut down because it gets its ego pricked, and the Moon just turns on the waterworks and the emotions start flowing. And so the Moon person can also be, you know, quite angry a lot of the times, or just frustrated, or feel like they're going out of their mind, because the stimulation of having somebody's Mars sitting right next to your Moon is something where you don't get any rest. And their desires, their selfishness, anything that has to do with how they use their power, their anger, is going to affect the Mars person, the Moon person. They're going to feel all of that. So they're constantly being stimulated by the Mars person, constantly, constantly, constantly. So this can be kind of an exhausting conjunction to have. And often when you see this one where the Mars is the man, and usually that is how you see this one, most of the time the Mars is going to be the male, or the male figure, or the masculine figure in the relationship, even if it's a same-sex couple. Very oftentimes, the Mars person is very driven to impregnate the Moon and to keep the Moon pregnant. So you see a lot of children between people that have this particular conjunction, because the Moon indicates pregnancy. It indicates motherhood, maternal things. And so Mars is sexuality. And so when the Mars person gets with the Moon, it's like there's just this unconscious need to impregnate the Moon and put the Moon in that maternal state. And the Moon loves that masculine side of Mars, so they want to bear the Mars' child. It's this whole romantic thing, and they feel more bonded in breeding. So yeah, you see this one between breeders for sure. I actually have this particular conjunction with my son, and he has his Mars in Scorpio. It's very powerful. It sits next to my Moon, very, very closely, because I have my Moon 29 degrees there. And so his Mars is very powerful, and he's 15. So it's an interesting interaction, and especially now that he's driving. So I was just driving with him yesterday, and he's, I'm reacting, I'm emotional over there, and he's, looking over, oh, you're overreacting, and you're crazy, and oh, why can't you just calm down? And I was just sitting there thinking, this is so classic Mars conjunct the Moon kind of interaction. And it's just a real spicy conjunction to have in synastry. And if you have it in a romantic relationship, you're definitely going to notice this one. It is really going to be hard to not have some real energetic, emotional run-ins with each other, because of the nature of what these two planets are. And, they're sitting right next to each other. So we have to learn to get along with this particular conjunction. First of all, we have to have the Mars person understand what's going on. The Mars person really needs to be aware that the way that they are perceived, the way that they are felt by the Moon person, can be very harsh, can be very severe, can be scary. And so, they're not going to strike other people like that, because they strike the Moon like that, because that's how they're looking at each other, in the geometry of it. So they just have to understand that, not everybody thinks that you're a tyrant, but this person does. This person can think that. This person can perceive you that way. They can be made to feel that way. I'm sorry, it can't be made to feel that way. They can choose to feel that way, because we always choose our feelings. But the Mars person can put them in a position where there's a lot of choices available to choose to feel hurt. And so we have to understand that we're going to have to treat the Moon person gently. And when we have a reaction, being the Mars person, we need to consider how that is going to disrupt or disable the feelings in the Moon person, and try to be sensitive about that. Because we have the Moon, she's incredibly, it's the most sensitive part of ourselves next to an insensitive part of somebody else. So we can love each other, we can have all kinds of compatibility, we can have everything in common. But if we feel as a Moon person that we are being wounded, hurt, irritated, pushed, controlled, sometimes cajoled or goaded by the Mars person, that can go a long way towards putting that Moon person in a position where they are not safe in that relationship, depending on the strength of the Mars and how that person personally handles their Mars. And that goes for all the hard conjunctions from Moon to Mars. Sometimes the Moon person actually has to extricate themselves from these contacts because they are being brutalized by this particular characteristic or this aspect of this other person. So you have to be aware when you see hard contacts and synastry between the Moon and Mars, and with the conjunction and the other hard aspects, you need to also look very carefully at the individual character of the two people. When you see this one, you can't just judge this alone and say, oh, they're going to be tearing each other's throats out and then having sex later. You have to look at the strength of the Mars person, how they individually use that, and how tough is the Moon. Sometimes we can have a really sensitive Mars and a more tough Moon, and this can be mitigated somewhat because their coping mechanisms and the way they deal with the world puts them in such a position where they don't, needle each other so much or create quite so much passion or feeling. So, I hope this was helpful. If it was, please subscribe to my channel. Yes, I do private consultation. You can find me on the internet at truthandaspectastrology.com. I'm mainly a relationship and intimacy astrologer, but I interpret all types of charts under the sun. And you can find me on Facebook at Truth and Aspect Astrology, Instagram as well. And I'll be back super soon with more super cool videos. Bye-bye.